Hello, everybody. Welcome to this briefing webcast on the world of automation, in the legal world, I should say. I'm Richard Brent, Head of Content and also the Editor-in-Chief here at Briefing, which I hope won't need too much introduction for many of you, but if you are new to us, we are the publication for the work and worlds of legal business leaders like yourselves, seeking to share perspectives and pick up very practical insights for smarter business management in various guises. Briefing is turning 13 this summer, and it's been a handy free app available on Apple and Android for the last couple of years, for much of the pandemic period. So that app now houses all of our regular editions, as well as special reports drilling down into market data and specific subjects. So do head on over and search for the familiar blue and white briefing colours at some point. We regularly feature interviews with strategic leaders across all business functions, like the people that I'm speaking to about the automation opportunity today. It includes analysis of the big business trends of the day, case studies on specific transformation priorities and projects, and special reports like our annual Briefing Frontiers research, which you may have seen came out recently, and which talks about the intersection of technology and other aspects of business strategies, such as growth and working patterns and processes. First of all, the usual reminder that the whole of the next hour's conversation is being recorded, and then it will be later distributed to our full briefing audience. So do bear that in mind. I have specifically also allotted time at the end of the conversation, the final 20 minutes or so, for questions. Do ask plenty of questions of the guests about what you're hearing today, and I will be feeding those questions to them. You can ask in the Q&A here, and those will be surfaced to me, and I'll be asking them as I say. Okay, so today we are talking about the opportunity for embedding automation in both legal and business process. According to our law firm strategy research of almost 80 leaders at the largest law firms, that's a collaboration with the professional services team at HSBC. In last year's research, 70% said that they were prioritizing investment in technology specifically for doing legal work faster or more efficiently over other areas of technology. After that came optimizing internal operations at 52%. And the biggest prospect of potential disruption that was identified in that research was peer firms that have more tech-driven business models than others. And one question that we asked in this year's Briefing Frontiers research, which I just mentioned, the polling of the decision maker, the large law decision maker audience, was around which tech investment opportunities they viewed most favorably in respect of making a really tangible difference to all three of efficiency, competitiveness, and workforce productivity. And this year, automation came top across all three of those variables against other types of technology that law firms may be exploring. Years ago, we used to talk in Briefing about the apparent law firm automation gap between the inroads that firms said they had managed to make and what was actually feasible with tools on the market. And anecdotally, from our interviews with leaders in recent years, it seems that the various pivots associated with the pandemic have helped to close that gap. Various either essential or now high priority projects have also helped pick up the pace of change we hear. But what's it like identifying these opportunities on the ground in the law firm environment and really getting them going? Are there any hurdles or hang-ups still to overcome? And what's the overall impact assessment in the space? I'm really pleased to say that, as you can see on the screen here, the session today, the conversations are in partnership between Briefing and NetDocuments, provider of cloud-based document and content and collaboration management solutions for law firms, as well as corporate legal departments. Last year, NetDocuments introduced the new tool Pattern Builder to its growing technology ecosystem. This takes a no-code approach to enable different parts of the firm to introduce automation to likely targets for process efficiency in a less centralized way than might otherwise be the case, empowering the team or the individual, for example, by picking up and pulling in clauses or populating data to quickly build a variety of legal document templates such as NDAs or M&A documentation or sales contracts, as well as documentation for business processes as well. So without further ado, I'm going to get into our first Q&A, but first I just want to introduce the three people who I will be speaking to, asking questions of today, and of course so will you, as I mentioned. First we'll have Michelle Taylor, who is Head of Product Portfolio at the law firm Lewis Silkin. Then it is Christopher Tart-Roberts, who is Chief Knowledge and Innovation Officer and also Head of Lawtech at Macfarlanes. And we will be joined after those two initial question and answer sessions also by Mike Creffield, who is the Business Manager for EMEA at NetDocuments. As I mentioned, that they are our partner for the webcast today. Okay, so I'm now going to welcome officially Michelle Taylor at Lewis Silkin. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, sorry about that. It seemed the office internet had a bit of a wobble there, so
that happens.
Me out of the session.
I'm delighted that you're with us, though. Can you start by telling me how Lewis Silkin's approach to this whole topic, automation, the opportunities that surround it, has moved on in the last 2 to 3 years? Are there particular highlights or trends that you would pick out?
Since the pandemic, people have needed to embrace technology more during the pandemic, and so it's accelerated the use of platforms like Teams, for instance, and other Microsoft products to collaborate and work in a remote setting. So I think people have become more self-sufficient in their use of technology. We moved to cloud telephony during lockdown and removed all of our desk phones. And I don't think that's something that we could have done pre-pandemic as easily. I don't think that it would have been a much bigger project and the requirements would have been much larger because of what people were used to doing. Automation was used to forward their landline numbers to their mobiles during the pandemic. Yes. So that's a basic example, isn't it, of something you don't really think about. And then I think that the growth of low code automation tools has grown so much, being able to drag and drop. And they've become more sophisticated. There's many more of these platforms to choose from, so which does make it difficult from an IT perspective to choose the right tool. But they're becoming, law firms are being asked to automate complex documents and focus on that process optimization, whereas it wasn't really something that we would kind of thought about before. We were quite a small firm, so pre-pandemic we were probably 350 people, whereas now we're kind of nudging towards 600. So in order for us to scale, we do need to think about our processes. Do we try to get people to self-serve and optimize those processes, or optimize those processes for them, or do we bring in more people to support, particularly in business service or junior type roles like paralegals and trainees? So I think it's just making, there's been a need to streamline workflows and, maximize that automation efficiency, and to find ways to help the lawyers do that.
Thank you. Interesting. And you have, haven't you, specifically brought in something fairly recently, something new, on that whole self-service piece, if not enabling people to actually self-serve, but at least to take on some decision making about what it makes sense to automate for themselves. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like, and the point you made there about, you know, weighing up, you know, what you need for the problem or the, you know, the challenge that you're trying to solve?
So we've moved to document automation for using Pattern Builder, and we're quite early in that journey. We were using another product as well, and we're moving some of the automation over to Pattern Builder, just because of some of the functionality that it provides in retaining styles, etc. And so, you know, we want to use that to enhance client delivery, you know, less manual intervention, you know, and previous to that, we were using templates and, you know, blobs on the template to fill in, you know, where you have your brackets. So it's quite a big change for us. So we're kind of at early stages of that document automation process. But we've also started using automation for desk booking and room booking. So we built some Power Apps, and then there was really a need for us to do that because our current systems were on our old software, which was going out of support. So we automated the room booking via Power Apps and developed that in-house. And then we also bought in an out-of-the-box desk booking Power App system, and but we found there was some functionality, some performance issues because it's based on SharePoint. So we decided to use Power Automate. So instead of, so the problem being that if you have more than 2,000 lines in a SharePoint list, the app started to underperform, and that's a known issue with Power Automate. So, you know, rather than having somebody go in and manually delete these bookings, we set up Power Automate to archive the bookings to another list, and then to delete them on a daily basis. And, you know, it's just it's a time-saving exercise, but also, you know, it's a boring job to have to do. It's a job that you have to remember to do, and you have to get somebody, and you have to make sure it's done. Otherwise, then the risk of not having that manual intervention, or having that manual intervention, means that if it isn't done, then your app then starts to underperform again, and then the user experience is affected.
Have you been able to actually quantify that benefit in that case, or is this sort of just has the advantage come through, you know, talking to people about their experience of work? Well, how do you?
Yeah, I think the advantage has been shown in that we get less service desk tickets come through that. You know, some of the problems that we had with that were you were able to duplicate a desk booking. So somebody had already booked the desk, but the system hadn't updated. And so somebody else was able to book the desk. So then you had a fisticuffs when you come into the office and you both think you've got the same desk. So it caused like real problems for people, in the, you know, they're arriving in on their anchor day and they haven't got anywhere to sit with their, you know, and they're not able to sit with their team, for instance. So it's, you know, it's a kind of well-being, it was causing a well-being problem as well. So it's not just about the tech.
Going back to Pattern Builder, if I can, and that the document automation aspect, the legal document automation aspect. Can you tell me a bit about how you sort of start with something like that? How is that a project like that managed, where as I understand it, the whole point is to enable people to, as I sort of said in my first question, to make some of their own decisions about how their working lives can be most enhanced with this sort of technology.
So I think we've had to start with IT, but we've also started with some practice development lawyers and paralegals in deciding what we automate. We're not giving everybody access to be able to automate documents.
Right.
We are selecting super users because, you know, even though it says it's, you know, even though it is low code, there is an, you know, an element of being able to choose which criteria and choose, you know, what you're putting into your document. So it's not as simple as, you know, just, you can't just get on with it. We've been really lucky that NetDocuments have given us a lot of support with that, and lots of lots of training sessions. So that's been really helpful. And so we started with NDAs, settlement agreements, and we're just gradually rolling those out to different legal practice groups, and making them available for them to start using, but in a very small way. So as I say, we're very early on in the journey. So you know, hopefully this will enable us to actually, we've got an add-in in Word, so
right.
You know, we're hoping that it will enable us to move away from that add-in to be able to create our documents directly in NetDocuments without and then they automatically save in the workspace as well, so that, you know, it removes those steps of people having to choose the template within Word and then choose where to save it, etc. And
then remember, you know, what steps they have to follow, etc.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Christopher sort of brought this up as well. What's your sort of assessment of how well integrated things like this currently are with other core systems, or to what extent they can be integrated with other core systems, and how important is that to sort of ultimate success here?
Yeah, I mean, there is a need. I think there's a particular need to integrate with Microsoft systems. With the growth of Microsoft in the introduction of things like Copilot, which you know, we're excited to look at and understand more about, it's going to be really important for us to be able to synchronize our documents, you know, particularly in SharePoint or Teams, with our document management system. And that's something you know, we've started looking at, which we don't have at the moment. But there's also a requirement for us to have, you know, have a better master data hub, so that we have one true source, you know, for integrations and automations, and in order to automate employee data into other systems and client data into other systems, and making sure that that data is clean and correct. And, you know, for that, we are looking at recruiting more people within the team to, you know, help us to build those solutions in-house.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Christopher. As I said, Chief of Lawtech and also Knowledge and Innovation at Macfarlanes. So I'm going to ask a similar question of you first. Can you summarise how your firm's automation journey has moved on in recent years? Did the changes that firms have had to introduce, you know, the adjustment to hybrid working patterns and obviously the essential changes of the pandemic, lead to any mindset or management shifts in priorities that touch the automation space, and what gaps that you could have there been any gaps that you've been able to fill with new tools?
Sure. I mean, I guess Like probably most firms, I think we saw quite a shift, quite a pivot as a result of the pandemic in lots of different ways. I think both in terms of what we actually were doing or what we needed to do, but also, and really importantly, in terms of people's mindset and the way that they approach technology and their comfort levels with technology and their receptiveness or hostility towards technology. So I think if I look back to the place we were at before the pandemic, we were doing a lot with automation. We've been doing a lot with automation tools for quite a while now. But there was definitely a real spurt, I think, of activity when we first went into the pandemic, just trying to keep the lights on as we all were. And once that initial flurry had passed, just making sure that we could carry on with the day-to-day, there was then a whole sort of slew of stuff that came up where we had existing processes that had probably been a bit creaky for a while, maybe manual processes, maybe paper-based processes that we then had to look at, that we probably wanted to look at for a long time, but they just never got onto the top of the priority list for whatever reason. But because of the way that we were having to work, we then needed to look at those because clearly they didn't work with us all being cast to the four winds. So that was sort of then the second phase, I think, is just looking at all of those things that were unable to operate quite as well when we were dispersed. I think the bigger thing that I've seen come out of it, though, and this is something that was probably a bit longer dated, is just a real shift in terms of people's appreciation of technology and their willingness to rely on it. Because I think, lawyers, law firms, relatively cautious beasts.
Yes.
There was a lot of caution pre-pandemic. The pandemic has stripped some of that away because people became more reliant on technology because they had to be more reliant on technology. And that's eroded some of that hesitation or caution, which has meant that going forwards, as we've been looking at automation and other things in other contexts, people have become probably more receptive because they've just become more reliant and more au fait with technology because they've had to.
Interesting, thank you. Can you give me a couple of examples of those processes that you've tackled more recently, whether it's in the space of legal work or indeed of the business process side, which I believe have traditionally been seen as an easier target to get going with automation?
Yeah, well, I mean, during the pandemic, there was an awful lot that needed to go on the sort of the business operations side of things. So we needed to look at things like our billing processes and how we raise invoices and how we pay out disbursements and how we pay out expenses and lots of those processes, which, to be honest, had probably been a bit manual, a bit more paper-based. So there's a lot of work that's gone into automating those and putting in place clear workflows and processes around those things. We've also seen an awful lot of progress on the more sort of outward facing side of things. So on the practicing side,
right.
Our lawyers using automation tools themselves much more. Our lawyers have used certain automation tools for quite a long time, things like document automation, right? That's been around for quite a long time now.
Yes.
And, is an absolutely terrific tool, so it mustn't be forgotten. But also looking at other tools that we can use which automate parts of the legal workflow. Also things like logic-based systems where you can structure automations that allow you to work through really quite complex decision trees, say in the context of legal or regulatory analysis, working out whether a particular client comes within the ambit of a certain regulation, and if they do, what they need to do and what they need to bear in mind. So using automation logic tools to kind of funnel through some of that analysis to help lawyers get to the output, the advice to the client. Okay.
And also in terms of helping clients themselves, I believe has been a recent focus. Is that right? How have you? Tell me a bit about that, and also how you factor thinking around automation into the firm's client value proposition.
Well, it is something that we've developed, I guess, quite significantly, again, over the last probably 4 or 5 years in particular. Not just because of the pandemic, but it was something that we'd been working on for quite some time. So my team, our Lawtech practice, you can very roughly divide our areas of responsibility into two. On the one hand, you've got the work that we do to use technology to enable our staff, whether they be lawyers or business services, to do their jobs better, to enhance what we already do, perhaps for our clients or internally. And then on the other hand, you've got work that we do to deliver new products and new services to our clients, which are really based on the technology, which are enabled by the technology. And I guess it's on that front where we've seen an awful lot of progress over recent years. And we have now quite a lot of tools, of products, if you want to think of it that way, that we make available to clients, which encompass elements of automation. Document automation is one example of that. But we also have a number of tools now that clients use for things like contract management, for example. Mm-hmm. So, our lawyers will spend a lot of their time drafting and negotiating for clients really complex contracts. And within those contracts, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of, obligations that need to be performed at points in time. There are terminations to handle and lots of other things. And so as a way of helping our clients essentially manage those contracts that we draft for them on an ongoing basis, we've been increasingly using technology to say, right, okay, here's a platform, a portal that will then help you with those ongoing things. It will help, remind you when you have to deliver a certain report. Mm. It will tell you when a certain obligation needs to be performed, perhaps, and it will help you track that and allocate responsibility for that within your organization. So there's an awful lot more that we're doing around that, as well as just going back to what I was saying a little bit ago about the logic-based tools. Mm. Giving our clients access to some self-service tools where they can do some of that legal or regulatory analysis themselves by using those automation engines.
What do those self-service tools sort of comprise? What does that look like? What are the sorts of things that they are able to do?
It can manifest in lots of different ways, really. I mean, one of the areas that we've been exploring quite a lot over recent years, and for obvious reasons, is ESG. Mm-hmm. ESG is a really complex area of regulation. You've got lots of overlap and quite a lot of complexity. And if you're an organization trying to find your way through that maze, you can, or we can on clients' behalf, use those logic-based tools to help clients really kind of just get an understanding of what's relevant to them, what applies to them, and what doesn't. So allowing them to input information about, say, their organization, the type of business that they do, the jurisdictions that they operate in, and various other things. And it helps funnel them through that kind of that logic to then get to the point where you can say, right, regulation A does apply to you, regulation B doesn't, regulation C does to an extent, but only in relation to this, this, and this.
I see. Thank you. So would it be fair to say that the types of legal work that automation can be applied to now it can also be applied to more complex legal work than might have been the case 3 or 4 years ago? And what's the trajectory of that? Are there sort of opportunities that you can sort of see on the horizon that we might not have thought would be possible when it comes to managing legal work 3 or 4 years ago?
I think it's absolutely the case now that the tools that are out there can perhaps better accommodate that complexity. I think it's probably fair to say that the automation tools that have been around for a long time have possibly been able to accommodate some of that stuff, but maybe haven't been so user-friendly. And particularly as we've seen some of the low-code and no-code solutions really develop, it's made that easier, because I think for a lot of these projects, particularly the ones that are external facing for clients, you don't necessarily at the outset have a very clear process map that you can follow. And so oftentimes it's about pulling something together that you then want to be able to rejig really easily and kind of get something up, get a you know, an MVP out there, get some lawyers looking at it, get some clients looking at it, and then get feedback, and then iterate and move things around and add in new steps and do various things. And I think the low code solutions, they lend themselves to that really well,
right?
Because you can just fiddle about with them really easily. And I think perhaps some of the more traditional automation tools, when you think about things like RPA, you know, it becomes a bit more difficult perhaps to go in and unwind.
Right.
And so that absolutely helps a lot. I think in terms of going forwards and kind of exciting areas that I see, I think we're seeing more and more different forms of technology, whether they be automation technologies or others, coming together and forming holistic solutions, if you like. So, you know, kind of 2 and 2 equaling 5, if you like. So some of the things that we're doing for clients, you know, they might involve part document automation, so where we help them with a tool that allows them to draft certain documents that they draft in-house much quicker and more efficiently. But within that same tool that we've given them, it also has contract management functionality. So when they've drafted the thing, the contract, and it's gone out and it's been signed, the system then helps them manage that on an ongoing basis in the way that I kind of described a second ago. So there's more and more opportunity to tie together elements of automation rather than each thing being sort of pretty distinct, to have the technologies talking to each other and connecting up and providing broader and more holistic solutions.
Thank you, Christopher. You're going to stay with us now, if that's all right, because I'm going to bring Mike Creffield of NetDocuments. There he is.
There you go. I had to press a button.
Good to see you. Just one click though. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Okay, so Michael Scargill from Shimon and Sterling says, I'm going to quote him completely. All this talk about tech caution, isn't it just a polite way of referring to laziness in getting to learn a new process? As with, for example, not bothering to learn the new features of your iOS or Android update, or being charitable, perhaps more so, fear of getting something wrong because you haven't understood how the tech works or had enough time or interest or use to get on top of it. It's a philosophical question to kick us off, I think. Don't know if anyone would like to take that one on.
I'll give it a stab if you like.
tech fatigue, tech laziness. Is that
I get entirely, you know, where he's coming from. I don't think it is laziness. You know, being honest about it, and I guess I'm a lawyer by background, so you know, particularly when we think about our legal team's receptiveness to technology, you know, I can easily put myself back into those shoes that I used to wear, and I do think the fact that a lot of our people within law firm, because they are so time poor, I think it is sometimes very, very hard. Even it's not laziness and it's not necessarily lack of appetite. It sometimes is as simple as people are just so busy for 8, 10, 12 plus hours in the day that there just isn't the time or the headspace to get your head around something new or different. And that's, you know, when I was talking about the pandemic, you know, that forced people to do that.
Yeah.
And so it pushed them up the curve a bit. And then I think once you're going, actually the updates and stuff like that, you take that in your stride. It's just that initial leap. And you do need to, you know, pay attention to that, and you do need time to wrap your head around that and how that affects what you're doing, particularly, you know, when you think about it from some of our lawyers, you know, from the perspective of some of our lawyers, well, what they're doing is pretty high stakes for clients, and they do not want to be in a position where the processes that they're following or the other things that they rely on to generate their output, they're not confident in when they're in those high stakes situations.
I mean, you did mention in your intro, actually, Chris, about receptiveness, and that's coming on. We're seeing that with our clients. The conversations I'm having, they are more receptive using technology. So it does exist, that caution, but we're seeing a lot more people familiar with that technology, and also clients are expecting to see it and for you to be using it. And not to forget, if you want to attract the right talent, you need to have these tools available to the firm.
We'll come on to exactly that question, I think. But first, Michelle, what do you want to respond to?
Yeah, I think, I agree with what Christopher said, that, they're lawyers and they're lawyers first, they're not technologists. So, I think it's our job to make it as easy as possible for them to do their jobs. And we're going through a restructure of our document management system, and that is based on feedback and engagement from the lawyers and the rest of the business who use our NetDocs. So, I think they are interested, and they want those processes to be as simple as possible so that they can do their jobs as effectively as possible. So I don't think it is laziness. I think, and when it comes to automation, I who wants to do those boring, mundane jobs that you can automate and get done for you, and then you can focus on more challenging work.
Yes, and that's another thing I wanted to ask, actually. So I'll do both of those. So it's also said that that automation frees time, and that's something that Michael said. Not necessarily laziness. Maybe they just haven't had enough time or to get on top of indeed technology itself. But is that the case in your experience, that it does free people to do this other work? And what is that? What is that other work that they could be doing? And does that can you actually track that has a tangible impact on your people's experience or your people's level of engagement with the work that they're doing? I'm really interested in whether that's that's something that is more than it's just said, is something that is actually sort of in some way measured. Is that?
I think if I can just answer that briefly, that one of the things that we want to do at Lewis Silkin is to do a bit more innovation, especially on client collaboration and client delivery. And we need lawyers for that. So if we can free up some of their time by automating some processes that may save them 6 to 8 hours a week or so, then some of that time can be put into innovation and initiatives in order for them to focus on client delivery, because they don't currently have the time to do that. And then obviously with us partnering with them as a business service department and helping them to look at what requirements they need and what they can do in the art of the possible, I think that's where you're going to get the benefits from freeing up the time for people. And also employee attrition. I think if you remove those tasks, then you're going to retain your employees a lot easier than you will if they have to spend 6 hours drafting a document.
Christopher?
I mean, I agree with all of that, and I think in terms of how you measure the benefit, I guess it depends on what you're talking about and the form of automation that you're talking about, obviously. But for things like document automation, it is possible to be very scientific and very empirical about the time savings that you can achieve. You can measure how long it would take you to draft a particular document the traditional way. You can measure how long it will take you to draft that using document automation technology. And the contrast between the two, can be really, really stark. And actually, I'll give you a really good example. There is a project that we did with a really big client of our real estate practice a few years ago. And it's in the context of a portfolio of commercial properties. And there's a very frequent churn of leases, lettings going on in relation to those properties. So our real estate team will draft new leases in relation to these properties really frequently, one a day, more than that a day. And we got involved in a project with our real estate team and with the client to look at how we could use automation to streamline that whole process. And what we ended up doing was kind of cobbling together various technologies. But the overall time saving there that we measured, that we realized, was that for one of these leases, the way that we used to draft it, it would take probably somewhere between 4 and 5 days for that lease to be generated, drafted within the firm, and to go out to whoever it needed to go to. And that's not because it took 4 or 5 days of labor. It's just that, you know, there are various things that happen. It takes a little while to get to the top of somebody's to-do list. Then they do it, but they'll mark up a document in red pen, then they'll pass it on to word processing, back and forth, and eventually you get to the point where you've got something that's ready to go out the door. So that used to take 4 to 5 days. Using automation technology, we managed to reduce that down to a turnaround time of 3 minutes. So client instructs us, says, we need this lease on these terms. We then take that and we do various whizzy things with automation technology, and the lease is ready to go out to the tenant and their lawyers within 3 minutes. And that, you know, that's incredible, and that's at one end of the spectrum. Right. Not suggesting every automation project is quite that great, but you can measure that because you know the as is and you know the to be. And I think when you start looking at these projects in those terms, that's when something clicks in people's heads, and that goes to the internal receptiveness. But to Mike's point, that also goes to the client imperative, because when clients start hearing things like that, they go, well, yeah, absolutely, we should be doing that, and you guys as a firm should be doing more of that.
And Mike, one of NetDocuments' 23 predictions for 2023. One of the first ones that I read did specifically tie the decision to invest in automation to engagement, to recruitment, the recruitment drive. What are you hearing from firms that you're talking to in that space, whether it's connected to their use of Pattern Builder or anything else?
Yeah, all of the above, really, from what we've heard from Michelle and Christopher. But I think there's a couple of things. I think Christopher referenced it as well. Optimizing the process before you automate it. Otherwise, you know, not everything's for automation. So optimizing that process is fundamental, absolutely. But also, you don't just set it and forget it. You need to revisit these automation processes as well. And some of the early automation processes that we're seeing now need to be rechecked. And that's where we're seeing a big market for Pattern Builder. So we're seeing that, and just users genuinely wanting to get their hands on it and do things themselves. And I think Michelle used the term self-serve. So yes, for them to self-serve to a degree once it's ready, once the firm has put together whatever safeguards that they're putting around it. And then fundamentally, where's the data that you're using as well? You know, everyone's keen to understand where that is, whether that's in your DMS system or it's wider. Maybe use an enterprise search tool, using world-class APIs as well to connect. So we're hearing all of these things from people. But yeah, automation continues to be a hot topic.
Thanks, Mike. We have another question, which I think we've somewhat covered, but I'm going to read it out anyway. It's from Kyle Gribben. I don't know which firm you're from. Apologies, Kyle. How important is the ability to use low-code technology specifically to build automated and integrated solutions? Does it play an important role in getting busy lawyers on board with a project like this? If you had to give it up in the morning, would it impact your plans dramatically? I've spoken obviously to Michelle quite a lot about low code specifically, but a bit less to you, Christopher. So what do you make of the low code movement and how important that is to progress here?
I would be it would be a sad morning if I woke up tomorrow and it wasn't there anymore. I think it makes the technology more accessible, and you know, different firms are approaching their use of low code and no code tools in different ways. Some firms, I think, are looking to put those technologies in the hands of their lawyers. And, Michelle mentioned having super users in practice areas. And I think that can work, absolutely. But it's one approach. You've then got another approach where you've got maybe teams like mine or other teams who still take responsibility for the construction of those automations. But the agility that you get from the low code and the no code solutions is much greater, I think, than some of the more traditional automation technologies. So you've got an accessibility advantage potentially, but I think what you definitely have is agility and flexibility. Michelle mentioned it as well, that ability to just drag and drop things around, which means that you can create something really quickly and then you can re-engage with whoever's involved in that process. And if that process needs tweaking within the automation, it's really easy to do that.
I think as well,
Michelle,
focus on security, because, giving tools to, anybody or, everybody in the firm, you do need to make sure that you've plugged any vulnerabilities and that your data is secure, and, that you're, for instance, that, with the rollout of Teams, we had to make sure that we locked down people being able to install third-party applications because of the permissions that you have to give those applications. And so I think I'm kind of for it to an extent, but guided by our team.
I actually, maybe just to build on that as well, I agree with you. I'm not necessarily an advocate for it. I think by and large, these technologies are much better capitalized on by having people within the organization that really have expertise in using them. And absolutely, those people need to work hand in glove with the lawyers, who are maybe on the front line, or with others within the firm who are using them. But I'm much more an advocate for doing it that way, because I think the other thing that I've certainly seen, and it picks up on a point that Mike made a little while ago as well, is that you mustn't underestimate the time that needs to go into maintaining those automations after they've initially been constructed. And so you need to have good rigor and good governance around those. And that's obviously much harder if you kind of just thrown the tools out at the general population and you say, well, have a go and build things yourself, because you might catch their interest for the initial build, but then when things start going wrong, or when updates need to be made, or for the 101 other reasons why that automation might fall down, and they do, I absolutely see within kind of what we do, and we've got a lot of them, out there, they can be quite brittle, and sometimes an automation will just fall down and you'll go, I don't really understand why, but it has, and you need to go in, you need to pick it back up, and you need to work that out. And I think there is a risk if you just give these tools to everybody, that it will hold their interest to begin with, but that maintenance piece and that governance piece will become really difficult, and then you'll see things drop off.
I think a good example of that is, somebody implementing Power Automate to automate a process, and then they leave. That is dependent on their account, and then people don't realize that actually it's not working anymore, and people don't have access. Ownership hasn't changed either. So that's where I think you need to make sure that you have that governance around who you give the tools to.
It's a great way as well, isn't it, Michelle, for your team to go and connect with those practice areas and really get them to question the process that they're running at the moment to get to that end goal. It's great that you're able to facilitate that and then give them a tool that can really enable them to do their best work.
Yeah, and it's also, the value in IT has been realised a lot more in recent years than probably, when I started in IT. We're providing the service and keeping the lights on and rolling out products that we'd chosen. We don't do it that way anymore. It is very much focused on the user experience and fostering that collaboration between business services as a whole and working with other teams in business services and the practice groups.
Thank you, Michelle. We've got just a few more minutes. If anybody does have any other burning questions for the last few minutes, we have got one more in the Q&A from Crystal Aguia from Winkworth Sherwood. I know she is from, and she says, you'll hate this question, Mike, so I'm glad that she's asked it.
I love this question, Crystal.
Is NetDocs looking into ChatGPT? It had to come up at some point, didn't it? Has it somehow now jumped into your roadmap? There's pressure to review it, although a big distraction at the moment as we've got other automation projects to focus on. But other vendors have done some work in this space, she says, for DMS, and they're knocking on the door.
Yeah, of course, we're seeing it everywhere. But what's interesting is not just ChatGPT, it's the underlying engine, and we've been tracking that for a few years now, and we're really excited about it. It's the best that we've seen on the market, and we've got some exciting things that we're doing internally that I'll be more than happy to talk to people about. But yeah, absolutely, we're not ignoring that, and we've seen the power of that. But I think it's once you start connecting Power Apps, Pattern Builder, and that chat engine all together, you get some quite exciting things about owning more and more of that document lifecycle for law firms. And that's been our vision for many years, that the platformization side of it. We've got this great platform, which is the largest cloud DMS platform with more clients on than anyone else. And that's been our vision. So the fact that we've got this platform and we've got this great tool that we could leverage, then yeah, expect some exciting and game-changing things from NetDocuments in the not too near future.
Good to hear.
Crystal is one of our clients. I'll happily share some more information with her, but not on a public forum.
Fair.
And me, Mike.
Yeah, sure.
Everyone wants that conversation. Christopher, Michelle, any final thoughts on that one? I know we've had one large firm, one Magic Circle firm, announce a new named bot based on OpenAI earlier this year. That's the only one I've seen so far. But
there's going to be hundreds of them, isn't there? There literally is going to be all of this. There's so much chat, but there's going to be this initial furore, but then what's going to be left? And it's great for us all to enjoy this summer of AI, but let's see what's left at the end of the year, and then you'll really start seeing where the benefit for firms will be. We're excited about that.
I'm just excited about Copilot and seeing what that brings, and obviously the Microsoft integrations and just around chatbot bots. We're looking at legal service management and enterprise service management, and it's about utilizing these the AI to make sure that when your firm is growing, you don't necessarily have to bring in new people to manage the demand as you grow. For instance, in service management, having more service desk agents, for more people, and there is a lot of behavioural change that we need to, just try helping people manage that and changing the way that they, that they log issues, for instance, and showing them that this, but you need to have all your underlying data. That needs to come first before you can introduce these. Otherwise, it's just going to, fall flat, isn't it? It's not, people won't have any confidence in it.
That's right. Well, it affects output quality, security, privacy, all of those things.
Yeah.
I think, I would echo all of that. I think generative AI technology in law is tremendously exciting. I think there is a huge amount of potential there. I think, where we're currently at, we're still at an early stage. So there is a bit of hype. And there is clearly some work to be done for all of us to better understand the potential of that technology. We've been looking at it for quite some time as well. There is a note of caution, obviously, to sound right now. There are limitations around that technology that we all need to be aware of. We need to make sure that our people are aware of, I think. But I think going forwards, there is a lot of scope for it to make a really, really big difference to the way that we work. You know, as law firms, we trade on our intellectual capital. It's what we offer to our clients. We all sit on these pots of gold that are essentially our people and the knowledge collectively within the firm. And these technologies are doubtlessly going to allow us to harness that institutional wisdom much more easily going forward and in really sophisticated and exciting ways. So yeah, I think it's a really, really exciting area.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, in that I think you know, when it comes to generative AI, we also, you know, we have to remember we can't do without the human eye on that content. You know, if we're getting a bot to create a clause on a particular area of law, you know, we're always going to need the lawyers to, you know, make sure that that's correct, and so it can't, you know, it's not going to replace completely, but you know, I've used it to help me you know, with some wording, if I'm struggling with something, and you can then adapt it to your own style.
I agree with that. It's all about support and enablement.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Completely.
I think I might track you all down this time next year for a follow-up conversation, see what's happening in the interim.
Let's do that.
Thank you. This has been a really interesting one. I have to say, I do a lot of these webcasts, of course, but I've particularly enjoyed this conversation. And thank you for giving so much detail about what you've been up to, and of course your thoughts on where this area is going as well. So final time, thank you, Michelle, from Lewis Silkin, Christopher at Macfarlanes, and of course, Mike from our partner NetDocuments. And see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.